everyone. You're listening to In the House podcast with Jenny Woon and Toni Singh. And today's episode is about 10 things that the real estate course does not teach you. How you doing today, Jenny? I know.
Good.
It's life-shattering. I thought for this episode, what we could do is maybe talk a little bit about our first years in real estate, or even the first year in real estate. Maybe identify some of the struggles, because I'm sure some of the listeners as well are just getting into real estate and they might come across these struggles. And then perhaps we could talk about, those 10 things that might be helpful for them that we wish that we would have known when we first started.
Sure.
Would you want to go first?
No, you go.
You want me to go
Yeah.
first? Okay.
You have the floor.
Oh my gosh, first year in real estate was so hard. I would honestly, and I would do it over again. It taught me so many things about myself. But I remember when I first started real estate, luckily I come from a real estate family, so even though I didn't come into the business trained, I'm sure I picked up some things along the way by listening or just observing. So the first thing that happened in that first year, obviously when you get started, the course won't necessarily teach you how to list property and price property and then get that property sold. So the biggest challenge for me was targeting and getting clients. Which I think is the basis of every realtor's business. You have to list property and sell property. That's what you're doing. So for me, I just started door knocking right away because it was the old school way to do things, and I knew that that's how members of my family had really successfully built their business. There are other ways to do it, but I wasn't a huge networker at the time, so I just started knocking on doors. And within the first, I think it was my first month, I did make 2 sales from nothing. And it was really empowering. It didn't mean that it wasn't hard. It was difficult because, I think there are certain progressions that a new realtor goes through. So it's kind of like, okay, the first step would be signing your first client. And then once you take a listing, what are the steps that you're going to do to get it sold? Well, it depends on what type of market it is too. There's a variety of things that are not in the course where you need to adjust. And that was kind of a learning experience. So the first year I did... for my first fiscal year, it was 6 or 7 real estate deals, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I was told at the time that it wasn't half bad. I didn't work with a team. I did it on my own, and it wasn't the type of production that I wanted to have. I wanted to have more production than that.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the starter for me, and then it was hard as well, just even with learning how to communicate effectively with clients, because there's a difference between, I think, communicating something effectively. So if they haven't understood what I've said, the communication problem is on me, most likely not them. So that was a huge learning curve too. And then the final thing, I guess, would be the taxes for the first year. What to hold back. I was not a business person when I got into real estate. I had a background in psychology. Completely different. So the first year was challenging because you're balancing, I think, so many different things. Getting the business, how to run a business effectively, communication with everybody that you deal with. So big learning curve up front. And then once you learn that, it was pretty much smoother sailing.
Yeah.
How about you?
I feel like listening to your story and many others who start in this business, I feel like I lucked out quite a bit because being in the right place in the right time and starting off in project sales. So I was working in project sales for about 6 months, and I was like, you know what, this is where I know, this is where I can create a lot of magic, and I got my license right away. From there, I worked for a developer for 4 or 5 years, and then went off to another developer, went out on my own. But at that time, I've already established a lot of relationships with developers and with buyers who bought in those projects. So imagine if I'm selling 30 to 200 homes a year. So one tower could be, 80 units. another townhouse project is 30 units. That's already a database that's really healthy for me to target.
Absolutely.
So immediately after once I went into resale, I was basically door knocking and making note to everyone that I actually am the expert in that building, and they were my first clients were just the projects that I sold, because I immediately knew what that building was about.
Well, it makes logical sense.
Yeah.
You have the knowledge and the skills already for something specific, and the connections. So that's it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I did actually start in project sales too, but I also was doing resale right away. So it was like both at the same time.
Yeah, so you were allowed. Whereas for me, I wasn't really allowed. It was just corporate sales, and I was considered an employee.
One developer at any given time, right?
One developer and one project at any given time.
Got it.
And
well, that's good experience though.
Very good experience. Very grateful for that. What I struggled with going into resale was not understanding the money management.
So it relates to the business too that I was kind of talking about, and the taxation. Like, I mean, it's all related.
Yeah.
And how do you make it super profitable with the pipeline?
Yeah, well,
pipeline.
for taxation, I was just told to write off everything. So I like every receipt, like dry cleaning.
Hey, they've cracked down on that now.
I know. Don't jinx it. No, but I'm really good. My accountant's really good.
Okay, good.
And if anybody needs a good accountant, Bluefish Group, they're really good.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
I like that shout out.
So I struggled with just trying too many things at once.
Yeah.
And not really giving things a chance, because I was like, okay, 30 days later, didn't hear much from the client or from that building, wasn't getting a lot of response. Let's move on to something different. So I didn't really give it a chance, and I wish I picked up earlier in the game was the Keller Williams.
Keller Williams is great.
Yeah,
for their training.
The Red Book, right?
Absolutely, it's fantastic.
Yeah, so because it pretty much tells you how to build your business and treat your real estate business as a company.
So Jenny's talking about The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller.
Yeah.
Oh, for those For those of you that are new and listening, it's a great book that you really should pick up if you are starting your real estate business. It does talk about all of these things that we're kind of talking about, but it breaks it down into segments, and it's really beneficial if you want to build a profitable real estate sales business. Yeah,
there's a lot of templates in there to work with, and gives you real numbers to work with as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think every realtor that I've ever spoken to ever in my life has said that their first year was very difficult. I think it's true of any business, regardless of the field. I guess that leads us into, like, what are the 10 things, or maybe you could name 5 and I would name 5 or something like that.
Oh, we take turns.
Yeah, we can take turns. 10 things that the real estate course did not teach you that you wish you would have known about before you entered the business, or like when you were first starting, I guess.
If I was to start the textbook,
oh my gosh.
which is what, 20 assignments?
It's this thick.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't see me if you're not watching our YouTube channel, but it's very thick, and it's mostly about mortgage financing.
Right.
We are not mortgage specialist people, but we do need to know how it works. So.
You have to learn how to use the financial calculator in the course.
I know, but normally, right now.
I don't think I don't remember last time I picked up
PV, future value, yeah.
It's now automated all online.
I know. Okay, so go ahead, talk about that book.
Where to find your clients. Where to find your clients.
Was that in the book?
How to read. No.
Yeah, it wasn't in there. I'm like, I don't think that was a chapter.
No, there's none in that. And and how to find your clients and how to approach them.
Okay, I'm gonna make a
let people know. If you guys are listening, and please make sure you take notes, because this is like real life scenarios and experiences that we've had and what we've heard about from other agents too. So,
well, you asked the question, how and where to find your clients. So what would be some suggestions for that?
First off, the number one fan and ambassador for you would be your family and your sphere of influence.
If you get along with your family. I'm just kidding.
If you don't have family, your sphere of influence, so people who you have hobbies with, your meetup groups, anybody who you chat with, any similar interest, what would you say a part of your sphere of influence would include?
Oh, for sure. COI, so we call them different, it's the same thing, sphere of influence and COI, same thing. They're honestly just people that you naturally connect with and that are in your corner and you're in theirs. So when you have those type of relationships, it's only natural. It just comes up naturally in conversation, about what you do, what you're passionate about. And I think that those relationships are the best ones to focus on when you're trying to build your real estate business, because when you're building a business, especially in real estate, it should be based on trust. They already know and trust you, right? If they're a part of your COI. So it's easier than contacting somebody cold. I personally love contacting people cold because I like a really big challenge, but it's not the easiest way to get clients.
Right. Okay, I'm going to learn something new. What is COI? Because I know SOI.
Center of Influence. It's the same thing. Sorry, I should have said.
I did not know that. Okay. I've only known like SOI.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Okay.
And so if we use it interchangeably, everyone, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, so how do we reach out to them? Phone call, picking up the phone, texting, letting people know. I think I remember having some sort of seminar from Brian Buffini. He has a section where it's like how to write letters to your sphere of influence, or how to write an email to your sphere of influence, announcing that you just got licensed and you're their go-to realtor. And for those of you listening that are new, he is a relationship builder. Again, bases relationships on trust, so he would be another great contact to look into if you're just starting out and you're looking to build your business in real estate. So number 2.
Yeah, I think, so for me, and I think this actually follows the proper progression, I think it would be how to sell and price property. I remember, I don't think the book discussed at all how to properly evaluate a home, and obviously there's great variance in terms of what type of product you're selling and where. So it could be different types of construction, different types of homes, condos, anything strata, townhouse, detached house, multifamily, commercial, all of these things. When I got my license, I honestly, when I had my first listing appointment, and that was from knocking on cold doors, I was like, oh, this is great. I have an appointment, but how do I properly evaluate the property to give them a price? And then, pricing it's not the most important thing, but it's a very important component of what we do. If the price is off and you're not taking the market into consideration, it's very difficult to get a home sold. Clients are hiring you to sell their home for the highest value in the least amount of time. So it was kind of that, and I remember going to my managing broker, Vincent Tang at Rennie at the time, and I said, Vince, I have this listing appointment. It's my first one for a house, but how do I look at the price? So we sat down and did it together, and it was just something that was learned, I guess, with experience. But I found that really difficult, because here I'm celebrating the fact that I've actually gotten someone to say yes to an appointment. And then I'm like, but then what do I do now? And then from there, this is related. So once you get the pricing right, you still need a proper marketing plan and strategy and way to actually get the home sold, because the real work, for me at least, I think the real work begins when you're negotiating. And then when you have an accepted offer, you have to walk it to subject removal for a firm contract in place.
This is the finesse of negotiating.
This is what I'm saying. You're basically, what I'm talking about is I'm at step, if it was a step from A to Z, I'd be at step B. I would say that. Does that make sense? Do you resonate
because I just trying to remember taking the CMA course.
That was a separate course, not related to licensing.
After you get licensed.
And I did that too.
But that course itself teaches you how to use the tool on Paragon, but doesn't really necessarily teach you how to price out a home, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay. A lot of the times what I use was this online, if someone was to do a renovation in their home, I just used Google and how much value does the kitchen offer for a resale? How much does the bathroom offer? And then I just use that type of to gauge and give advice to my clients on where they need to pour their money into.
Well, for a reno, yeah. But I mean, like going in, looking at a home and taking certain things into account for, whether or not they have a special feature, or if you need to subtract something for wear and tear, odd part of the lot, like that came with experience.
Right.
There wasn't actually a course at the time that specifically focused on that. So I think some realtors that are starting out, it's beneficial for them to start with a team so they can shadow someone. I didn't do that. So I had no idea what I was doing.
What if there's no teams that are willing to help?
I mean, you could do it the way I did. You'll still be successful, but it's not easy. It's like if you were climbing a mountain, it's really an uphill battle. So I think you could make it easier on yourself. Or there's also separate training. I'm just kidding, guys. There's separate training programs as well that you can explore. So different real estate coaching services, they actually will teach you things like that.
Right.
And it's outside of the board.
And I hate to say this, but BC assessment is kind of a gauge as well. I mean, I don't use that
go
as
off
the final number.
I know.
But
I just did a video on that. It irritates me so much on why not to use the assessment for pricing.
Don't rely on it 100%.
No, I mean, you can evaluate from there if you're looking at apples to apples and you're taking a market adjustment into place. But no.
Let's tell our listeners why they shouldn't be using BC assessment as a way to finalize their number.
Well, I mean, that would be, okay, let's give an example because I think this might resonate with people. If you're the seller, Jenny, and I came out to your house last June, July, and I evaluated your property then, that was in 2019. We're in 2020 now. The market is fluid. It never stays the same. It can change very quickly. Or you can see micro changes within that market where that price is off for sure. The other reason is that with BC assessment, they're not sending someone into your home.
Right.
And specifically, if you have any features, benefits, or upgrades that are worth something, it will not take it into account.
Documented.
It's not documented. So actually, the value could be lower on that assessment.
Right.
Or it won't take into account the fact that you have 3 huge dogs, not you, but I've seen this before, 3 huge dogs. They've scratched up everything in the house, damaged everything, and you have wear and tear. So that you have to deduct.
Right.
So yeah, we don't go off of those, but it's always baffling to me why realtors do. And also when you go in to list a property and the client, obviously it was like done in a higher market, that assessment, and they're like, it always sells for higher than the assessment. It's inaccurate. I don't know why we're going off of inaccurate information.
Right. And it's proven this year because last year was much slower.
Yeah.
And this year we've had a lower number of listings which have increased the volume of sales.
Yes.
And prices slightly.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't want to be relying on 2019 data.
No, sorry, I had to get that off my chest. It bothers me so much. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
This is your outlet.
I know. Sorry, we only gave them 2 things. What would be a third thing that you wish that the real estate course would have taught you or prepared you for?
I would probably say one of my biggest things is referrals, getting that documented, because there are so many times I actually have been where I was promised a certain referral fee or a certain amount of compensation, and there was somehow some sort of weird miscommunication that happened in between, or forgotten words.
Between realtors or developers?
No, so you know what? Developers have always been the easiest for me to work with. They've been very reliable, but realtor to realtor.
Really? I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I'm really shocked by that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't mention...
No, don't.
who. I won't mention, but it seems to be a pattern of...
I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to say all
Yeah,
this.
I know what you're going to say.
So for some reason, like female to females, it's always been, there's like an immediate trust or respect. But when I deal with like a top producer male agent, I don't know if that, is this what you predicted what I was going to say?
It's one of them.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, but yeah.
And a commercial broker as well, where they take their word back.
Commercial's common.
Where they
you have to get it in writing.
Back. Yeah, and there was for sure a clear understanding of how our splits were going to work, but and it was in writing, and a couple times I didn't get in writing, so that was bad on me. And they just did not respond back, and I never got compensated for the referral.
You know why it's difficult too, and this is great advice that Jenny's sharing, everyone, because I think this is true of you, Jenny. It's definitely true of how I like to run my business. If I tell somebody that I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I don't need you to sign an agreement because I told you what was going to happen, and it's going to happen.
Word of honor, right?
100%. But when I do deal with other people, I do get it in writing because I know that sometimes they will go back on their word.
Right.
So yeah, I think you have to protect yourself for sure.
And I'm not trying to call anybody out, but it just seems like it's like a pattern of mine.
Yeah, it's also, if it is commercial, that's the industry. It's different than residential.
That's 1 out of 3 though.
Yeah, okay.
1 out of 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I would get it in writing. So one of the tips that I would offer is get the referral in writing before you send the referral over.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great advice.
And get the client to sign to acknowledge that referral as well. Just remember that you need to have that piece of document as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is one of the rules, and that was changed a couple of years ago, but it's better for transparency. Yeah. So that was what, 3, 4?
Yeah.
We're on the 4th one? Okay, I think I might have already mentioned this, so we don't need to beat a dead horse, but did I say how to negotiate or not really?
Slightly, but it wasn't that particular point.
Man. You know what's so interesting is that a lot of consumers will wonder what real estate agents do. Seriously. Like what?
So they don't read Schedule
what do they do?
B
what
or Schedule
do they do?
A. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's because, so there's a lot of great realtors out there. Like, great. Would I hire them to sell my house? Absolutely. And like in any profession, there are some that are not as professional. But that's true of like any type of profession, right? How to negotiate. It's such a special skill, and it will be the difference between selling a home or not, garnering your seller the highest price or not, knowing what to do if a deal or negotiations are going sideways in order to leverage somebody else in order to do your job to get the seller's home sold. Or likewise, if you're representing the buyer, there are certain tactics in negotiations. Like, it is definitely a skill. And that's not touched on at all when you first get into real estate, but it's one of the most important things that we do.
Yeah, I think part of my book club, we've just finished reading Never Cut the Difference.
Never Split the Difference.
Never Split the Difference.
Yeah, it's a good book.
And that's a fantastic book. Talks about mirroring, talks about repeating words from
NLP and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so good one to pick up.
Man, we should start a book club. Are you guys taking notes on all of these great books? You should read them.
One of mine would be hiring a coach right away. So managing brokers may promise you a few one-on-one sessions as soon as you sign up with them, but I feel like you need someone to be accountable to. So if you actually have someone from the brokerage that you signed up with who is willing to mentor you for about 12 months, get you through your first year, or even hiring Tom Ferry, Brian Buffini, and Richard
Mike
Robbins,
Ferry too. Yeah.
Mike Ferry. I would suggest starting up with a coach right away. And I know the investment could be really big, but the return is that much bigger.
What's the standard? So I used to be in coaching as well. It was after my first year though, because like I told you, I didn't have training. Should have done it sooner.
Yeah.
But it was $1,000 a month American.
Okay.
Depending on who you go with, it can be less, like 500 to 1,000. Some of them are more, 2,500 a month.
Yeah, so it varies. I think you just have to find the right fit, and depending on what you want help on. So do you want help on trying to get motivated each day, trying to make calls every day? Do you need more words of wisdom and affirmation?
Yes.
Do you need to know how to reach out to clients? So that's a Brian Buffini program. For me, I actually signed on with my Remax when I first joined resale. I signed up with Remax, and they had a Brian Buffini program automatically incorporated into the sign-in. And then that was shortly done, like after a few days. So it was like really, really condensed. But I didn't actually hire another coach until about 3 years ago. So I hired a business coach, but it wasn't about how to get leads or how to make follow-up calls. I've done all that.
It's like the next step.
It's just more about like, what is my purpose in life?
Yeah.
You know, how do I contribute to being a better person and into this industry.
And have a more fulfilling life. I know, I agree. Actually, my brother Warren really loves Brian Buffini too.
Yeah.
He liked that style a lot, and he had recommended that material when I first started out, because he was licensed before me. That was the next one that I had, which was how to run a business, but I think we've covered that, because that was covered in the coaching that I did with Mike Ferry as well.
Can I expand on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in the book with the Keller Williams book, there's 4 models that you need to be able to excel at. And the 4 models are lead gen, organizational model, systems model, and budget. So let's talk about 4 of them, because I think it's really important that you have to have these 4 pillars in order to this industry is changing every day. We're bombarded with emails and new clauses and new forms, new rules, new
so you're talking
principles
about
on
legislative,
mortgages,
rules, economic, and also like,
so I would say if anything, these systems need to be the most static, like in terms of just being able to secure you, and you have a system in place every day to work with that's scalable, and that is always working while you're sleeping too. Right?
Yeah, that's the best.
Right. So let's talk about lead gen. Is filling in the pipeline, and outside of your sphere of influence, there are just so many other avenues. Open houses, which may be a little bit limited right now, but just anybody who you meet on the streets. My goal, I think it was Brian Buffini who recommended this, was always give X number of cards each day. So everybody you talk to, give your business card out, or get their phone number. Any other ways that you would be able to get a lead? One scenario for me, I was just giving like a listing presentation in a random coffee shop, and someone else was like next to us, overheard my conversations, and so right after my presentation and that client left, that person ended up like coming over to me and asking me real estate questions, and I was like, that's cool. Like,
I understand. So like a serendipitous event where it just kind of happened and then business happened?
Unexpectedly.
It happens all the time. My very first real estate sale. I went to a extended family get-together, and I was coming directly there from an open house. I had no intentions of talking about real estate. I was on my off time, but I was dressed the part, I was focused, and they were like, hey, it just so happens that we're looking for X, Y, and Z. I said, sure, I'll help you. They said, do you have a business card? I'm like, I'm sorry, I haven't had them printed yet, so I wasn't even prepared, but they were actually my first sale.
Nice.
And I think if you're looking for opportunities and you're looking for special relationships where they're meaningful, that's exactly what you're going to find. And it's a great way to build your business that way.
Let's talk about budget model.
Sure.
So where the money's going and how the money's coming in. What are some of the formulas that we should know about, or some of the things that we need to be able to like implement into like our Google Docs, or because I use QuickBooks, so
you do. It's an easy system, isn't it?
Well, I have never opened up the software, but
you haven't? Okay.
No, because I rely everything on my accountant. I have to say, I just focus on like things that I'm really good at, and everything else I just disperse all that.
Okay, so you hand it off to your accountant, and they use QuickBooks.
Yes, and they put everything into QuickBooks, and all the data comes out of that.
And then you get the data, and then you basically business plan or budget around that?
From that,
Okay, that's good. That's a better way. It's actually more efficient than what I do.
Okay.
I actually should work on this method, because we're not perfect, and definitely this is an area I can work on. I give everything to my accountant as well. We've only just started going over kind of the method that you're using, going over things that way. What I was doing before was, I'm interested in fixed costs. So there's a couple of things, like fixed cost to get a listing sold, and then variable as well. So I kind of calculate how much it's actually going to cost in order for me to take the listing, market it, and get it sold. And then I'll put that against the actual profits minus the fees and everything like that. But I like to know that for my own knowledge, so it's just easier. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be a minimum of X amount in order to do this, and then anything on top of that is the profit.
Let's just say you're getting $7,000 commission on a listing versus a $20,000 commission on a listing. Is your spending on that the same, or are you?
Yeah, that's a good
more?
question. We just recently started talking about offering separate packages, like a gold package, silver, and bronze. Normally, all of the marketing that we do is standard and the same. So whether or not it's a lower price point that we're selling versus a higher price point, we will still offer the same things, because I think it's important from a marketing perspective in order to support that client. If it's a special luxury listing, we might do something additional on top of that. But typically, the other thing that we have been looking at is, and it's not done in the real estate industry, but it is in every other profession, where you take a retainer up front. I know, it's weird. They're like, what? But
I wouldn't even know how to start that conversation.
From a business perspective, it actually makes the most sense. And real estate is so interesting because it's literally the only field where it's like, hey, listen, I'll take your listing. Don't worry, let me work for free and you can pay me after. I think that's an industry thing, guys. Just because it's the way that it's always been done doesn't mean that it's the only way, and your time is worth something. So these conversations, we could probably have a podcast episode on at a later date, but I think it's a further conversation that needs to be had.
I do take a retainer for working with developers, because the conversation is, there's a lot of strategizing behind the scenes before the launch, and that could be months ahead.
That's right. And you have to, and that's standard practice for working in marketing with developers. But what about the individual listings? Well, I'll tell you this much. When COVID happened, the cost per listing that you're taking to market it often goes up to like $1,000 of your money all in before you get paid. So if you have 10 listings, it's $10,000 plus just for marketing those homes. And if they don't sell, or if the seller changes their mind and you don't have a clause in the contract for that, you're leaking and bleeding funds. Which means you can't operate. I feel strongly about that too.
Organizational model, so HR, hiring talent, like I mentioned before, just focusing and working on things that you're really good at.
You're really good at that, though. You're good at forming teams.
And just like handing things off that I don't want to do. It was hard at the beginning. It was a struggle.
Okay, I'm struggling with it though right now.
Because I control everything. I want everything to look perfect. And now I'm like, you know what? I want more free time. And that's good for you. That's my priority.
So what suggestion then would we have for people that are kind of segueing into that type of the model?
I would say give up your social media, because that takes up so much time.
Yeah, it does. It's so much better when you have someone else do it. We just did that.
I think creating the brand, like we have a fantastic member on our team. Her name is Miranda, and she created our brand for In the House.
She's right here with us, guys. You can't see her. She's the best.
She's behind the cameras right now. But I would have to say I come up with so many ideas, and I'm pretty sure she probably thinks like, this girl just never stops thinking, and how do I create this out of nothing? And so she produces.
It's funny too, because for those of you that don't know Jenny, she'll email you at 4 a.m. And I have a young family, so I used to get up at 4 a.m. to go to the gym when I was building my business and in real estate. I can't do that anymore because I'm way too tired. But I'll look at my phone, I'm like, why are you emailing me at 4 a.m.? I will respond to you at 8.
You're not the only person that says this, but it's just the best way I can get my work done.
I used to do that too.
And sometimes I'm thinking, oh my God, I hope they turn off they silence their phone, because their spouse or partner probably hates me.
It's fine. Come on, you should have your phones off, guys, and you shouldn't be sleeping with them near your head. It's not good for you.
That's a good point. That's probably one of the points that we should include.
Oh, turning it off?
Yes. Learning to, because
they don't talk about work-life balance at all, which is a bit outside of scope, but almost inside scope. Because I've seen, I don't know about you, but a lot of very successful top-producing realtors, they often have followed in the past a common theme.
What's that?
In busy markets, and it's so busy, and you're going, but you get burnt out. Every top producing realtor that I know, almost, I would say unless they have certain boundaries into place or they value the work-life balance and they have formed a proper team, they still get burnt out from time to time. We're seeing it in our brokerage right now. We're all tired.
Yeah. I've experienced that, I would say 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's when the whole team members started being added on. So I've had members on my team for about 4 years, one of them 2 years, another one just about 7 months now, 8 months. So that's been really helpful because I get to focus on business development and signing on new projects.
Like the big picture.
Yeah, the bigger picture and building the brand and the company. And that brings me to the final pillar, which is systems. So adding CRMs, making it scalable and repeatable. And that's one thing that I feel like the real estate course doesn't teach you.
It doesn't, but I have a question for you. Which CRM do you think is the best one to use right now? Because it's changed over time, and CRMs are a difficult thing. Some of them don't offer everything that your team would need, and then the other ones, it just has so many different features that it's very difficult to dial in.
Down. Yeah. So what I find is it's really hard to find one that will produce a front-end website and provide a back-end CRM. So it kind of works hand in hand, like a very robust machine. There are companies where it just does the CRM, but has no clue. You have to connect it with some sort of HTML coding.
It's not efficient.
It's not efficient, and then there's some that are just the website, but they don't provide the CRM. So I've gone through probably 4 or 5 CRMs through my entire career. On top of that, I'm managing about 3 different CRMs for developers, and they're using Infusionsoft, Salesforce, Spark, Lasso, and then on top of that, my team is currently using Brivity, which is, I believe, Ben Kinney's.
Ben Kinney is great.
Yes, his CRM, who's from Washington. I've also used Boomtown.
Oh, you have?
Very expensive.
I know. I didn't use that one.
To Canadian dollars, I was spending close to $4,000 a month because of the Facebook and Instagram ads
integration and stuff.
That they were adding on. Guys using?
We're trying to find a new one right now because exactly what we're talking about right now, the CRMs that we have tried in the past, a lot of them are great. Like, I shouldn't have said that Top Producer is not great. It is, but for what our team needs, it doesn't do everything that we need it to do. So then our assistant is left with doing additional tasks or piecing the two together, and that is energy and manpower that we don't want to spend there. We just want the system to work on its own. So
I think what's important that you have to have is the data integrity. So inputting the proper information so that the system is going to work for you tenfold. So that means proper legal names, phone numbers, emails, and then setting up an email campaign that's entirely automated for you.
Yeah, and also we like checklists as well. So when we're walking a client through the process, we need to know exactly what stage that they are at, or what stage the sale of their property is at, in case, and so we don't have things basically drop through the cracks.
So I've heard dot loop's really good.
Exactly. So we haven't used dot loop. Well, I did before, but I didn't integrate it into the system. I'm just drawing a blank right now. I'm so sorry. There was one that Gina Bourne had actually mentioned she thought was really good because it integrated with exactly what we were looking for. I can't remember the name right now.
So a new one, a developer signed up with us is HubSpot. And if you haven't used it yet, it seems to be working really well. It's very cost effective as well. Not too much of a startup fee, but the startup fees can run from $200 all the way up to $4,000, $5,000 just for setup, and then the monthly cost can be from $100 to, I paid up to $3,000.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. Yeah, there's a great variation there, and it kind of depends on how you run your team, what you want the capabilities of the system to handle.
And even I know one of the websites, they're really good at SEO, but then they don't have the CRM to back up with all the leads that you're going to be getting from that website.
So what's your favorite one to work with then right now, if you had to pick For
a
your
CRM?
team, for your team, not for the developers, yeah.
Oh, for the real resale?
Yeah.
I'm going to still stick with Brivity just because we're in this 3rd year into it now. And all our emails go out of that. And we send out our surveys from there. So it's been able to capture a lot of the information we need.
All right, well, that's useful for people. It was useful for me too, actually. Thanks for bringing that up. And I hope it was useful for our listeners.
One of the things that I asked a new agent from my office, Jason, just to give me some feedback because he's in his first few months. Actually, he just signed up right before COVID. And
wow. Great time to start, yes.
So, toughest time. I mean, anything, if he can get through this, he can get through anything.
Yeah.
He wanted to know, how does one learn about different types of transactions? Because you can only really encounter it when you actually are faced with that.
So when you say types, do you mean different types of homes, like different types of homes, or do you mean different classes of properties? Like,
I would say, like, let's just say how to deal with a leasehold, how to deal with a co-op, how to deal with a trailer mobile home, or even different scenarios where there's rental tenant issues.
So for me, I've taken all of those courses. They're separate courses for each individual thing. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of work, and they're not all covered under the education, right? I was just for my own personal knowledge that I did that. So the courses that are offered through the board, most of those courses are actually really great. There's just no integration really of giving up. Maybe they should have an intro one actually for different types, and then part 2, which is if you want to do mobile home sales or whatever, here would be the specialization for that. But I've just done it through individual courses over the last 10 years. How about yourself? I don't know if there's a more efficient way.
Yeah, because there's just so many different scenarios. I would probably say when you are, I would not say fake it till you make it.
No, they should consult their managing broker right now.
Yeah, and just ask your surrounding peers for advice. We, at Oakland, we have a Slack channel where we can put out all the questions, and there's a really good wealth of support from all the agents in the office, and they're giving us feedback. And honestly, our managing brokers, I have like access to 3 of them here, and they're really good at answering questions right away.
Well, that's great. Yeah. And that's the support that he probably needs, because I would suggest in this scenario, because you probably won't have time to register if you're doing one for the course and do the education before you're actually selling it. I would say just go to the managing broker and ask them to help you with it. That's their job.
I would take extra courses, so I know you're only needing to take 18 credits for every 2 years, but I've always exceeded that, even signed up for courses outside of the real estate board, feng shui classes.
Yeah, those are fun.
Building construction courses with BCIT, e-commerce, so I understand buying behavior online and understanding how social media works. Just, there's always like community courses that you pay under $100 for 1 night or 2 nights through the Vancouver Community School, and just like taking random courses where it'll help you fill that wealth of knowledge.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
So I think, to be honest, everyone, I don't know if that was 10.
but I think we covered quite a bit.
But that's pretty much everything I wanted to say, except for what else did I have on here?
Should we talk about one last thing?
Sure.
Is talking about unique selling proposition, because you just are put out there, you don't know, you're just like, kind of running around and figuring out what areas you should be focusing on, or you're grabbing every client that's willing to work with you. In the long run, should they be focusing on something very specific, like a target market or an area?
I think it's always a great idea to have you mean niche marketing? Okay. I think it's a good idea. However, how are they really supposed to know unless they're getting certain experiences out there? It's almost like you need the experience that first year to see what you like, what types of homes you like selling, what kind of client is your ideal client who you want to work with. And then I would suggest from there building it out, because I think it would be impossible to really know until you're actually in it. I mean, you could have an idea, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to deviate from the plan.
Right.
Is that kind of what you were thinking too, or were you thinking that they should have something right up front?
I don't know if they would know what their specialty is yet.
You can't. Yeah. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, so I would say if you find a pattern
Yes.
in the type of referrals you're getting, then work with that group, because they're going to be your number one fan. They're going to be your ambassadors, and eventually that whole group of type of buyers will be, and sellers will grow for you.
Like for me, I love working with families. I didn't know that until I started working with families.
Right.
Because they go through a different buying process than an investor would.
Mm-hmm.
My business partner and brother, Warren, loves working. He likes working with families too, but he's specific with numbers.
Okay.
So he loves investor profiles.
Okay.
And I find it interesting too. It's just that most of my clients are, I mean, I have investor clients, but families that are looking to achieve something specific,
Right.
and then making that happen.
Right.
So I wouldn't have known that until I had more experience with different types of transactions.
Yeah, I would pick up a book maybe on like emotional intelligence, because I think there's just so many different types of buyers and what they're going through, and it's better to be able to read them and be able to kind of navigate your conversations on how they want to be heard.
Is there a specific book and title that you want to recommend to the listeners?
No, I have not read one on emotional intelligence, because most of my courses in university were about psychology and about emotional intelligence. And so naturally, through corporate project sales, a lot of the coaches that came through our doors and came through our presentation centers were talking about emotional intelligence. So I've actually never really picked up a book, but if anybody has any recommendations, we'd love to hear back on your feedback.
Okay, I think that about covers it for today. I hope that this episode was easy to follow. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or do you think, we're good? If you guys have any questions or want to get in touch with us, then do so at In the House Podcast. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, guys.